The sun hung low over the New Mexico territory, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson. When Kade Quinlan first saw her sitting on that weathered fence post outside Monticello, her silhouette dark against the burning horizon. He had been riding for 3 days straight, chasing down a herd of stolen cattle that belonged to the rancher who employed him, and exhaustion clung to his bones like dust to his worn leather boots. But something about the woman made him pull his horse to a stop, the animal snorting and shaking its mane as if sensing the shift in its rider's attention. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, her dark hair loose and whipping gently in the evening breeze. She wore a simple dress, faded blue like the summer sky, and even from a distance, Kade could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held herself as though the weight of the world pressed down on her. He dismounted slowly, his spurs jingling with each step as he approached. The woman did not turn to look at him, her gaze fixed on the setting sun as if it held all the answers she sought. "Evening, miss," Kade said, removing his hat and holding it against his chest. His voice came out rougher than he intended, scraped raw by days in the desert wind. She turned then, and Kade felt something shift in his chest. Her eyes were the color of spring moss, green and alive despite the sadness that seemed to dwell there. Her face was lovely in a way that had nothing to do with perfection and everything to do with character. There were lines at the corners of her eyes that spoke of both laughter and tears, and her lips, though unsmiling, were full and expressive. "Good evening," she replied, her voice soft but steady. Kade gestured toward the town behind them, where lamplight had begun to flicker in windows as darkness crept across the land. "Are you waiting for someone? Can I help you get somewhere safe before nightfall?" The woman looked back at the sunset, and for a long moment she said nothing. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, she spoke. "I am waiting for a reason to stay." The words hit him harder than any fist ever had. Kade found himself stepping closer, drawn by something he could not name. "Stay where, miss? In Monticello," she nodded slowly. "Or anywhere, really." "I have been wandering for so long, Cowboy, from town to town, looking for something or someone to anchor me. My husband died 6 months ago in a mining accident up in Colorado. We had only been married a year." Her voice caught slightly, but she pressed on. "Since then, I have drifted. No family left, no home to return to. I came to Monticello thinking maybe I could start fresh, but when I got here, I realized I am just so tired. Tired of moving, tired of the emptiness. If I cannot find a reason to stay, I think I might just keep riding until there is nowhere left to go." Kade felt his throat tighten. He knew something about emptiness, about loss. His own parents had died when he was young, taken by fever, and he had spent most of his 26 years drifting from ranch to ranch, never putting down roots, never allowing himself to want more than the next job, the next horizon. "What is your name?" he asked. "Violet Mercer," she said, finally meeting his eyes again. "And yours?" "Kade Quinlan. I work for the Double R Ranch about 10 miles north of here." He twisted his hat in his hands, searching for the right words. "Miss Mercer, I do not claim to have all the answers, and I know we are strangers, but I do know that giving up is not the answer. Monticello is a good town, full of good people. Maybe you just need a little time to see that." Violet's expression softened slightly. "You are kind to say so. But kindness and good people, while precious, are not always enough to fill the void inside." "No," Kade agreed, "but they are a start." The last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon, and the first stars began to emerge in the deepening blue above. Kade made a decision then, one that would change the course of both their lives. "Miss Mercer, would you allow me to buy you supper at the boarding house? Mrs. Patterson makes the best stew this side of the Rio Grande, and her biscuits are light as clouds. You look like you could use a hot meal, and I know I could. He offered her a small smile. After that, if you still want to leave, I will not stop you, but at least you will leave with a full stomach. Violet studied him for a long moment, and Kade could see her weighing the offer, weighing him. Finally, she slid down from the fence post, smoothing her skirts. "All right, Mr. Quinlan. Supper sounds nice." The boarding house stood at the center of Monticello, a two-story structure with a wide front porch and cheerful yellow curtains in the windows. Mrs. Patterson, a plump woman in her 50s with laugh lines around her eyes and flour perpetually dusting her apron, greeted them warmly. She gave Kade a knowing look when he introduced Violet, and he felt heat creep up his neck. "Welcome, welcome, Mrs. Patterson said, ushering them to a table near the fireplace. "Sit yourselves down, and I will bring you both something to warm your insides." The boarding house dining room was cozy, with several other guests scattered at tables, eating and talking in low voices. The smell of beef stew and fresh bread filled the air, making Kade's stomach growl audibly. Violet smiled at the sound, the first genuine smile he had seen from her, and it transformed her face entirely. "When did you last eat?" she asked. "Breakfast day before yesterday," Kade admitted. "Been tracking stolen cattle and did not want to stop. Did you find them? Found where they crossed into the canyon lands. Tomorrow I will head back with a full report for my boss." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "What about you? When did you last have a proper meal?" Violet's smile faded. "I honestly cannot remember. The last few weeks have been a blur." Mrs. Patterson arrived with 2 steaming bowls of stew, a basket of biscuits, and 2 cups of coffee. The food was as good as Kade had promised, rich and hearty, and they ate in companionable silence for several minutes. "You said you work for the Double R Ranch," Violet said eventually. "What do you do there?" "Cattle work, mostly. Rounding them up, moving them between pastures, keeping an eye out for predators and thieves. Sometimes I break horses, help with repairs around the property. Whatever needs doing." He buttered a biscuit. "The ranch belongs to a man named Richard Rowlands. He is a fair man, pays decent wages, treats his workers with respect. I have been with him for about 3 years now, which is the longest I have stayed anywhere." "Why is that?" "The longest you have stayed anywhere," Kade considered the question. "I suppose I was always looking for something without knowing what it was. My parents died when I was 12, and I got shuffled between relatives who did not really want me. As soon as I was old enough, I struck out on my own. Been moving ever since." "Until the Double R," Violet observed. "Until the Double R," he confirmed. "Richard is a good man. Made me feel welcome, like I belonged somewhere. His wife, Martha, treats all the ranch hands like family. They have 3 children, all still young. It is a good place." Violet took a sip of her coffee, steam curling up around her face. "It sounds wonderful. You are lucky to have found it." "I know," Kade said. "And I think maybe you could find something similar if you gave Monticello a chance." She set down her cup, her expression growing distant again. "I loved my husband very much, Mr. Quinlan. James was his name. He was a dreamer, always chasing the next opportunity, the next fortune. That is what took us to Colorado, his certainty that he would strike it rich in the silver mines. Instead, the mine collapsed, and he was gone in an instant." Her voice remained steady, but Kade could see the pain in her eyes. "After he died, his debts came due. Debts I did not even know he had. I lost everything we owned paying them off, everything except what I could carry." "I am sorry," Kade said, and he meant it. "That is a heavy burden to bear. The debt is settled now, but I am left with nothing. No money, no prospects, no purpose. I came here because someone on the road mentioned that Monticello was a growing town, that there might be opportunities. But when I arrived this morning and walked these streets, I just felt so lost. I ended up on that fence post, watching the sun set, and I thought maybe it would be easier to just disappear. Kade reached across the table, stopping just short of taking her hand. Miss Mercer, I know we have only just met, but please believe me when I say that would be a tragedy. This world has too few good people in it already. We cannot afford to lose any more. Violet's eyes glistened with unshed tears. You do not even know me. How can you say I am good? I can see it, Kade said simply. In the way you carry yourself, in the way you speak. You have been through hell, but you are still here. That takes strength. They finished their meal in silence, but it was a different kind of silence now, less heavy, more contemplative. When Mrs. Patterson came to clear their plates, she mentioned that she had a room available if Violet needed a place to stay for the night. I have very little money, Violet said quietly. Nonsense, Mrs. Patterson said, waving her hand dismissively. You can help me with breakfast in the morning and we will call it even. Any friend of Kade's is welcome here. Violet looked at Kade, and he gave her an encouraging nod. Mrs. Patterson is as good as her word. You will be safe here. Thank you, Violet said, and Kade heard the relief in her voice. I accept your kind offer. Kade stood, preparing to leave. He had his own bunk back at the ranch, and Richard would be expecting his report in the morning. But he found himself reluctant to go, reluctant to let Violet out of his sight. Something about her called to the lonely places inside him, the parts he had kept carefully locked away for years. Miss Mercer, he said, settling his hat back on his head, would it be all right if I came back tomorrow? Maybe I could show you around Monticello properly, introduce you to some folks, help you see if this might be a place where you could stay. Violet stood as well, smoothing her skirts again in a gesture he was beginning to recognize as nervous habit. I would like that, Mr. Quinlan. Thank you. Kade, he said. Please just call me Kade. Then you must call me Violet. He smiled and she smiled back, and for a moment the sadness in her eyes seemed to lift just a little. The ride back to the Double R Ranch gave Kade time to think. The night was cool and clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. His horse, a sturdy bay mare named Rosie, knew the way home and plodded along without much guidance, leaving Kade free to turn over the evening's events in his mind. He had never been one to believe in fate or destiny, had always figured a man made his own way in the world through hard work and determination. But meeting Violet felt different, felt significant in a way he could not quite articulate. The raw honesty of her pain, the vulnerability she had shown in admitting she was looking for a reason to stay, it had struck something deep inside him. When he reached the ranch, most of the hands were already asleep in the bunkhouse. Kade saw to Rosie first, brushing her down and making sure she had water and feed before heading to his own bed. Sleep came slowly, his mind full of green eyes and wind-tangled hair. Morning arrived with the crow of roosters and the sounds of the ranch coming to life. Kade washed up, changed into clean clothes, and headed to the main house to give Richard his report about the cattle. Richard Rowlands was a man in his 40s, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. He listened carefully as Kade described the tracks he had followed, the direction the thieves had taken, and his recommendation for recovering the animals. Good work, Richard said when Kade finished. Take Martinez and Williams with you tomorrow and see if you can bring those cattle home. But today take the day off. You have been riding hard and you look tired. Actually, boss, if it is all right with you, I would like to head into town, Kade said. Richard raised an eyebrow. Town? You never go into town unless you have to. Kade felt his face warm. I met someone yesterday. A woman. She is new to Monticello, and I offered to show her around today. A slow smile spread across Richard's face. Well, well, this is news indeed. Of course, you go ahead. Any woman who can get you to voluntarily spend time in town must be something special. She is, Kade said, then realized how that sounded. I mean, she seems like a good person who could use a friend. Sure, sure, Richard said, his smile widening. You go be a friend, Kade, just do not forget to come back. Kade rode back to Monticello with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness churning in his gut. What if Violet had changed her mind overnight? What if she had decided to leave after all? He urged Rosie into a faster trot, suddenly anxious to get there. The boarding house was bustling with morning activity when he arrived. Through the window, he could see Violet helping Mrs. Patterson serve breakfast to the guests, moving gracefully between tables with plates and coffee pots. She had pulled her hair back into a loose braid, and she wore the same blue dress. But somehow she looked different in the morning light, more substantial, more present. He tied Rosie to the hitching post and went inside. Violet spotted him immediately, and her face brightened. She said something to Mrs. Patterson, who nodded and took the coffee pot from her hands. Good morning, Violet said, approaching him. I was hoping you would come. I said I would, Kade replied. I am a man of my word. I am learning that. She glanced down at her dress. I am afraid I do not have anything else to wear. This is all I have. You look fine, Kade said honestly. More than fine. But if you want, we could stop by the general store. Mrs. Chen, who runs it, sometimes has ready-made dresses, or at least fabric and someone who can sew. Violet bit her lip. I told you I have very little money. Then it is a good thing I have some saved up, Kade said. Consider it a loan if it makes you feel better. You can pay me back once you get settled and find work. Kade, I cannot ask you to do that. You are not asking, I am offering. He held her gaze. Let me help you, Violet, please. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but I will pay you back, every cent. I do not doubt it. They left the boarding house and began walking down Monticello's main street. The town was modest but thriving, with a general store, a blacksmith, a church, a saloon, a doctor's office, and various other businesses lining the dusty road. People nodded greetings as they passed, and Kade returned them, aware of the curious glances directed at Violet. Monticello was established about 15 years ago, Kade explained as they walked. Started as a trading post and grew from there. Most folks here are ranchers or farmers, with some miners working claims in the hills. It is a good community. People look out for each other. It seems nice, Violet said, looking around with interest. They reached the general store, a large building with wide windows displaying various goods. Mrs. Chen, a small woman with sharp eyes and quick hands, greeted them as they entered. Kade Quinlan, what brings you to town twice in as many days? She asked, then noticed Violet. And with a lady, no less. Introductions, please. Mrs. Chen, this is Violet Mercer. She is new to Monticello. Violet, this is Mrs. Chen. She runs the best general store in the territory. The only general store in Monticello, Mrs. Chen corrected, but she was smiling. Welcome, Miss Mercer. What can I help you with today? We were hoping you might have some dresses or fabric, Kade said. Mrs. Chen's eyes lit up. As a matter of fact, I just received a shipment from Santa Fe. Come, let me show you. She led them to the back of the store, where several ready-made dresses hung on a rod. They were simple but well-made in various colors and styles. Violet ran her hand over a green dress that matched her eyes, then checked the small tag attached to it. Kade saw her face fall when she saw the price. Too much, she murmured. Try it on anyway, Mrs. Chen urged. There is a curtain in the corner where you can change. Violet looked at Kade, who nodded encouragingly. She took the green dress and disappeared behind the curtain. When she emerged a few minutes later, Kade felt his breath catch. The dress fit her perfectly, cinching at her waist and falling in soft folds to her ankles. The color brought out the green in her eyes and complemented her dark hair beautifully. "You look lovely," he said, his voice coming out huskier than he intended. Violet blushed, a pretty pink color rising in her cheeks. "It is a beautiful dress, but I really cannot afford it." "We will take it," Kade told Mrs. Chen, "along with one more dress for everyday wear if Miss Mercer will pick one out." "Kade, no," Violet protested. "Yes," he said firmly. "You need clothes and I have the money. End of discussion." Violet looked like she wanted to argue further, but Mrs. Chen was already pulling another dress from the rod, this one a practical brown cotton. "This would be perfect for work," Mrs. Chen said. "Sturdy fabric, easy to wash, and I will throw in a shawl at no extra charge because I like seeing Kade here being a gentleman." By the time they left the store, Violet was wearing the green dress and carrying a package containing the brown dress, the shawl, and a few other necessities that Mrs. Chen had insisted she needed. Kade's coin purse was considerably lighter, but he did not regret it for a moment. Seeing Violet really smile, was worth every penny. "Thank you," Violet said as they walked. "I promise I will repay you. I know you will, but there is no rush." He gestured toward a small building with a sign that read Dr. Samuel Hendricks, physician. "That is our doctor. He and his wife Helen are good people, and over there is the church. Pastor Williams gives a fine sermon on Sundays if you are so inclined." "I used to go to church with James," Violet said softly, "but after he died, I found it hard to believe in a God who would take him from me so soon." "I understand that," Kade said. "I felt the same way after my parents died, but Pastor Williams, he does not preach fire and brimstone. He talks more about hope and community, about being there for each other. It helped me those first months after I came here." They continued their tour of the town, with Kade pointing out various landmarks and introducing Violet to people they met along the way. Everyone was friendly, if curious about the new woman in town. By midday, they had made a complete circuit and ended up back near the boarding house. "There is one more place I would like to show you," Kade said. "If you are not too tired." "I am fine," Violet assured him. "Where?" "It is a short ride out of town. Would you be willing to ride double on my horse?" Violet hesitated only a moment before nodding. "All right." Kade helped her up onto Rosie, then swung up behind her. Having Violet so close, feeling the warmth of her body against his, made his heart beat faster. He took up the reins and guided Rosie out of town, heading west toward a cluster of red rock formations that rose from the desert floor like ancient monuments. "Where are we going?" Violet asked. "You will see. It is not far." They rode for about 20 minutes, following a narrow trail that wound between the rock formations. Finally, they emerged into a small canyon, and Violet gasped. A spring-fed pool of crystal-clear water filled the canyon floor, surrounded by cottonwood trees and lush grass. The red rock walls rose up on 3 sides, providing shade and shelter. It was an oasis in the desert, a secret pocket of green in a brown landscape. "It is beautiful," Violet breathed. Kade dismounted and helped her down. "I found this place last year while tracking a stray calf. It is on Double R land, but not many people know about it. I come here sometimes when I need to think, when the world gets too loud." They walked to the edge of the pool, where the water was so clear they could see the sandy bottom. A few small fish darted between the rocks, and a blue heron stood in the shallows, watching them with one eye. "Why did you bring me here?" Violet asked. Kade looked out over the water, choosing his words carefully. Last night you said you were looking for a reason to stay. I cannot give you that reason, Violet. That has to come from inside you. But I wanted to show you that Monticello, this part of New Mexico, it has beauty and peace to offer. It has good people and quiet places. It has possibilities. Violet was quiet for a long moment, taking in the canyon, the pool, the trees. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. When James died, I thought my life was over. I thought I would never feel anything again except this hollow ache. And maybe that would have been easier to just stay numb. But then yesterday, sitting on that fence post, I realized that numbness was its own kind of death. I was just a shell walking around, going through motions. She turned to face him, and Kade saw tears on her cheeks. Then you came along, this stranger with kind eyes and a gentle voice, and you offered me supper. Such a simple thing, but it made me feel human again. And today, showing me the town, buying me these dresses even though you hardly know me, bringing me to this beautiful place, it is making me feel something I have not felt in a long time. What is that? Kade asked softly. Hope, Violet whispered. You are giving me hope, Kade Quinlan. Something broke open inside Kade's chest, some dam he had built years ago to protect himself from feeling too much. He reached out and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks with his thumb. I am glad, he said, because you are giving me something too. You are making me believe that maybe, just maybe, there is more to life than drifting from job to job, never putting down roots, never letting anyone in. They stood there at the edge of the pool, the desert sun warm on their shoulders, the sound of water trickling over rocks filling the air. Kade wanted to kiss her, wanted it with an intensity that surprised him, but he held back. It was too soon, too fast. Instead, he took her hand and she let him, her fingers curling around his. Will you stay, Violet? At least for a while. Give Monticello a chance, give yourself a chance to heal. Violet looked down at their joined hands, then back up at him. Yes, she said, I will stay. The relief that washed over Kade was almost dizzying. Good, that is good. They spent another hour at the canyon, sitting on a flat rock and talking. Violet told him about her childhood in Missouri, about her parents who had died when she was young, leaving her to be raised by an aunt who was stern but not unkind. She told him about meeting James at a church social, about how his enthusiasm for life had swept her off her feet. He was always so certain that good things were just around the corner, Violet said. Even when times were hard, he never lost that optimism. I loved that about him, but it also made him reckless sometimes. He would make decisions without thinking them through, would jump into opportunities without considering the consequences. Is that what happened with the mine? Violet nodded. He heard about the silver strike in Colorado and was convinced we should move there immediately. I wanted to wait to save more money first, but he insisted, said we would be rich within a year instead. She trailed off, swallowing hard. I am sorry, Kade said again, inadequate words but all he had. I know, thank you. Violet squeezed his hand. What about you? Have you ever been in love? Kade considered the question. I thought I was once. Her name was Sarah, and I met her when I was working a ranch up in Colorado, actually. She was the rancher's daughter, pretty and smart. We courted for a few months, and I thought maybe we had a future. But then her father made it clear that no drifting cowboy was good enough for his daughter. He wanted her to marry a man with property, with prospects. And Sarah, well, she agreed with him in the end. That must have hurt. It did, Kade admitted. But looking back, I think my pride was hurt more than my heart. Sarah and I, we did not really know each other, not deeply. We were attracted to each other, but we did not have what my parents had. They used to talk for hours about everything and nothing. They laughed together, made decisions together, supported each other. That is what I want if I ever decide to settle down, that kind of partnership. "It sounds lovely," Violet said wistfully. The sun had started its descent toward the horizon by the time they rode back to Monticello. Kade was acutely aware of Violet's body pressed against his, of her arms around his waist to steady herself. It felt natural, felt right, in a way that should have scared him but somehow did not. When they reached the boarding house, Kade helped Violet dismount. They stood awkwardly for a moment, neither quite ready to say goodbye. "I will come back tomorrow," Kade said. "Richard is sending me and a couple of other hands to retrieve those stolen cattle, but I should be back by evening. Maybe we could have supper again." "I would like that," Violet said. "And Kade, thank you for everything, for seeing me on that fence post and stopping, for caring about a stranger." "You are not a stranger anymore," Kade said. "You are a friend." "A friend," Violet repeated and smiled. "Yes, I suppose I am." Kade rode back to the ranch with a lightness in his chest that he had not felt in years. He had given Violet a reason to stay, but in doing so, she had given him something equally precious, a reason to hope. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Kade would work the ranch during the day, often riding out before dawn and not returning until after dark. But whenever he had time off, he went into Monticello to see Violet. She had found work helping Mrs. Patterson at the boarding house, cooking and cleaning in exchange for room and board plus a small wage. She also helped Mrs. Chen at the general store a few days a week, and had even started taking in sewing work. "She is a hard worker, that one," Mrs. Patterson told Kade one evening. "And she has a good head on her shoulders. She will do well here." Violet seemed to be settling in, becoming part of the community. She attended church on Sundays, and people had stopped looking at her with curiosity and started treating her like one of their own. She was making friends, particularly with Helen Hendricks, the doctor's wife, who was close to Violet's age and had a warm, welcoming manner. And every time Kade saw Violet, he fell a little harder. The way she laughed at his stories, throwing her head back with genuine delight. The way she listened when he talked, really listened, asking thoughtful questions and remembering details he mentioned. The way she looked at him, with those green eyes that seemed to see straight into his soul. He knew he was in love with her. Probably had been since that first sunset, though he had not recognized it then. But he was afraid to tell her, afraid that she would say it was too soon, that she was not ready, that her heart still belonged to the husband she had lost. One Saturday evening in late September, Kade took Violet to the town social. It was held once a month in the church hall, a chance for the community to gather, share food, and enjoy music and dancing. Kade had never attended before, but when Mrs. Patterson mentioned it to Violet and Violet mentioned it to him, he found himself agreeing to take her. "You clean up nice," Violet said when he arrived to pick her up, dressed in his best shirt and trousers, his hair slicked back and his boots polished. "So do you," Kade replied, and he meant it. Violet wore the green dress, and she had done something special with her hair, pinning it up in a way that showed off her graceful neck. She looked beautiful. The church hall was already full of people when they arrived. Tables laden with food lined one wall, and a group of musicians with fiddles and guitars were tuning their instruments in the corner. Children ran around playing tag while their parents talked and laughed. Kade Quinlan, "As I live and breathe," called a voice, and Kade turned to see Richard and Martha Rowlands approaching. "I did not think we would ever see you at one of these socials." "Special occasion," Kade said, and introduced them to Violet. Martha's eyes lit up with interest. "So you are the young woman we have been hearing so much about," Martha said warmly. "Kade has mentioned you." "Has he?" Violet said, shooting Kade an amused look. "Once or twice," Kade muttered, embarrassed. They spent the next hour mingling and eating. Violet charmed everyone she met, and Kade found himself feeling proud to be with her, to be the one she had come with. When the musicians started playing, couples began taking to the floor to dance. "Would you like to dance?" Kade asked, hoping she would say yes despite his limited skills. "I would love to," Violet replied. Kade led her onto the floor, placing one hand on her waist and taking her hand with the other. He had learned basic dancing from his mother years ago, and it came back to him now as the music filled the hall. They moved together, Violet following his lead effortlessly. "You are a good dancer," she said. "So are you. Did James teach you?" Violet's expression grew thoughtful. "Actually, my aunt did. She believed every young lady should know how to dance properly." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I have been thinking about James a lot lately." Kade's stomach tightened. "Oh, yes, and I realized something. I will always love him, always carry the memory of our time together. But he is gone and I am still here, still alive. And I think, after all this time, I am finally ready to accept that." "What does that mean?" Kade asked carefully. Violet met his eyes. "It means I am ready to start living again. Really living, not just going through motions. It means I am ready to open my heart to new possibilities." The music swelled around them, and Kade felt like his heart might burst out of his chest. "Violet, I need to tell you something." "What?" He took a breath, gathering his courage. "I have feelings for you, strong feelings. I know we have not known each other very long, and I know you have been through a terrible loss, and maybe it is too soon, but I cannot keep it inside anymore. I am falling in love with you, Violet Mercer. Maybe I already have." Violet stopped dancing, though they remained in the middle of the floor, couples whirling around them. Her eyes were wide, shining with emotion in the lamplight. "Kade," she whispered. "You do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I just needed you to know. I needed to be honest." "Kade," she said again, and this time she smiled. "I am falling in love with you too." The relief and joy that surged through him made him feel 10 feet tall. Without thinking, without caring who was watching, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, tentative and sweet, full of promise and hope. When they pulled apart, Violet was blushing, and Kade realized that the music had stopped and people were staring. But then someone started clapping, and someone else whistled, and suddenly the whole hall was applauding. "About time," Richard called out, laughing. Kade and Violet laughed too, holding each other as the music started up again. That night, after the social ended and Kade walked Violet back to the boarding house, they stood on the porch talking for hours. They made plans, tentative at first but growing bolder. Kade talked about wanting to save money, maybe eventually buy his own piece of land and start his own ranch. Violet talked about continuing her sewing work, maybe even opening a small dress shop someday. "We could build something together," Kade said. "A life, a future." "I would like that," Violet replied. "I would like that very much." They began courting officially after that night, and if the people of Monticello had any doubts about Violet Mercer before, they vanished now. She was Kade Quinlan's girl, and that was recommendation enough. The autumn passed in a blur of happiness. Kade could not remember ever being this content, this excited about the future. He worked harder than ever at the ranch, saving every penny he could. Richard, seeing his dedication, gave him a raise and more responsibilities. "You have changed," Richard told him one day. "You used to be a good worker, but you always had one foot out the door, ready to move on to the next thing. Now you are invested, you care. That woman is good for you, Kade." "I know," Kade said. "She is the best thing that ever happened to me." In late October, Kade made a decision. He rode into Santa Fe, a journey that took 2 days, and spent his carefully saved money on a ring. It was simple, just a thin gold band with a small diamond, but it was the best he could afford, and he thought Violet would love it. He planned the proposal carefully. He took Violet back to the canyon with the spring-fed pool, the place where she had first told him she would stay. It was a crisp November day, the cottonwood trees golden with autumn leaves, the sky a brilliant blue. They spread a blanket near the pool and shared a picnic lunch that Mrs. Patterson had helped Kade pack. Violet was relaxed and happy, telling him about a new sewing commission she had received, and Kade's heart pounded so hard he was sure she could hear it. Finally, when the moment felt right, he took her hand. "Violet, I need to ask you something." She looked at him, curious. "What is it?" Kade slid off the blanket and knelt on one knee. Violet's eyes went wide, her hand flying to her mouth. "6 months ago, I found you sitting on a fence post at sunset," Kade said. "You were lost and hurting, looking for a reason to stay. I did not know it then, but I was lost too, just in a different way. I spent years drifting, never allowing myself to want more than the next job, the next horizon. But you changed that. You made me want to put down roots to build something lasting. You made me want to be a better man." He pulled out the ring, holding it up. "Violet Mercer, I love you with everything I am. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making you happy, giving you reasons to stay, not just in Monticello, but with me?" Tears streamed down Violet's face, but she was smiling. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Kade, I will marry you." He slipped the ring on her finger and she pulled him up, kissing him with a passion that made his head spin. They held each other by the pool, the desert sun warm on their shoulders, and Kade thought that this moment, right here, was the happiest of his entire life. They were married in the Monticello church on a cold December day, just before Christmas. Pastor Williams performed the ceremony, and it seemed like the entire town turned out to witness it. Violet wore a new dress, white with blue trim, that she and Helen Hendricks had sewn together. Kade wore a new suit that Mrs. Chen had ordered special from Santa Fe. Richard served as his best man, and Helen stood up with Violet. When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife and Kade kissed his bride, the church erupted in cheers. At the reception, held in the church hall, there was food and music and dancing. Martha Rowlands had baked an enormous cake, and Mrs. Patterson had contributed pies and cookies. It was a true community celebration. "I am so happy," Violet told Kade as they danced. "I never thought I would feel this way again. Thank you for not giving up on me that first night." "Thank you for choosing to stay," Kade replied. Richard had given them a wedding gift that left them both speechless. A plot of land on the edge of the Double R property, 20 acres with good water and grazing, and a promise to help Kade start his own herd. "You have been loyal to me for years," Richard said when he told them. "And I know you will do right by this land. Consider it an investment in your future and a thank you for all your hard work." With the land secured, Kade and Violet began making plans in earnest. They would live in a small cabin that Kade would build with help from the ranch hands and townspeople. Violet would continue her sewing work, and Kade would build up his cattle herd while still working for Richard part-time. The winter was hard but joyful. Kade and several of the ranch hands worked to build the cabin, while Violet stayed at the boarding house and prepared for their new home. She sewed curtains and quilts, accumulated dishes and pots, made everything ready. In March of the new year, the cabin was finished. It was small but sturdy, with a main room that served as kitchen and living area, a separate bedroom, and a loft for storage. There was a stone fireplace for heat and cooking, and Kade had built Violet a special shelf for her sewing supplies. The day they moved in, Violet cried happy tears. "It is perfect," she said, turning in a circle to take it all in. "It is ours. It is home," Kade agreed, wrapping his arms around her. They settled into married life with surprising ease. Kade worked the land and tended his growing herd, while Violet managed the household and her sewing business. They quickly became known for their hospitality, often hosting dinners for friends and neighbors. In late spring, Violet began to feel ill in the mornings. At first, she thought it was something she ate, but when the sickness persisted, Helen Hendricks suggested she see Dr. Hendricks. After the examination, the doctor confirmed what Violet had started to suspect. She was pregnant. Kade was over the moon when she told him. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Violet asked, though she could see the answer on his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Kade said, pulling her close. "You have given me everything, Violet. A home, a purpose, and now a child. I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer. Violet continued her sewing work, though she slowed down as her belly grew. Kade became almost comically protective, fussing over her constantly, making sure she did not overwork herself. "I am pregnant, not fragile," Violet would remind him, laughing. "I know, but I cannot help it." "You are carrying our child, the most precious thing in the world." Their son was born on a snowy January morning, a healthy boy with dark hair and his mother's green eyes. They named him James after Violet's first husband, a gesture that meant everything to her. "You are honoring his memory," Violet said through happy tears as she held their son. "Thank you for that. He was part of your life, part of what made you who you are," Kade said. "And I am grateful to him because his love helped shape the woman I love." Little James was a content baby, and Kade was a devoted father. He would spend hours just watching his son sleep, marveling at the tiny perfect features, the little fingers that would curl around his thumb. "I want to be the kind of father mine was," Kade told Violet one night as they lay in bed, their son sleeping in a cradle nearby. "Patient and kind and always there." "You already are," Violet assured him. As James grew, so did their ranch. Kade's herd expanded, and he became known for breeding quality cattle. Violet's sewing business also flourished, and she eventually did open that dress shop she had dreamed of, a small storefront in Monticello that Helen helped her manage. 2 years after James was born, Violet gave birth to a daughter they named Emily. She had her father's dark hair and a sunny disposition that charmed everyone she met. Their little cabin suddenly felt cramped, so Kade added on 2 more rooms, expanding their home to accommodate their growing family. Life was not without its challenges. There were harsh winters and dry summers, sick cattle and lean times. But they faced everything together, supporting each other through the hard moments and celebrating the good ones. One evening when James was 5 and Emily was 3, Violet and Kade sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in those same shades of amber and crimson that had colored the evening they first met. "You remember that first night?" Violet asked as if reading his thoughts. "Every detail," Kade said. "You were sitting on that fence post and you looked so lost." "I was lost," Violet said. "I had given up, was ready to just disappear, and then you stopped. You offered me supper and kindness when I needed it most. You said you were waiting for a reason to stay." Violet took his hand, squeezing it. "I found more than a reason. I found a home, I found love, I found you." "I found you too," Kade said, "and everything changed." They watched the sun slip below the horizon, their children's laughter filling the air, and Kade felt a profound sense of gratitude. His life had led him down many roads, through many sorrows and disappointments. But all of it, every struggle and hardship, had led him to that fence post at sunset, to a woman who was waiting for a reason to stay. He had given her that reason, but she had given him something even greater. A purpose, a family, a love that filled all the empty places he had carried for so long. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of their children. James grew tall and strong, with his mother's thoughtful nature and his father's work ethic. Emily was bright and creative, always drawing or making up stories. When James was 8 and Emily was 6, Violet discovered she was pregnant again. Their third child, a boy they named William, was born in the spring, completing their family. Kade's ranch continued to prosper, and he eventually bought more land adjacent to his original plot. He hired a few hands to help with the work, and became known throughout the territory for his fair treatment of workers and the quality of his livestock. Violet's dress shop grew as well, and she eventually took on an apprentice, a young woman from town who wanted to learn the trade. They built additions onto their home as needed, until it was a sprawling but comfortable house that always seemed to be filled with laughter and activity. They hosted Sunday dinners for friends and neighbors, and their door was always open to anyone in need. Richard and Martha Rowlands became like family, their children growing up alongside James, Emily, and William. The bond between the two families was deep and lasting, built on years of mutual respect and affection. As the children grew older, Kade and Violet made sure to pass on not just skills and knowledge, but values. They taught their children about hard work and honesty, about the importance of community and helping those in need. They told them stories about their own lives, about loss and redemption, about finding hope in unexpected places. "Your mother was the bravest person I ever met," Kade would tell them. "She had lost everything, but she chose to keep going, to keep hoping. That is real courage." "Your father saw me when I was invisible," Violet would add. "He stopped when he could have ridden past. He cared when he could have ignored me. Never underestimate the power of simple kindness." When James was 15, he asked his father about the first time he met Violet. They were working together, mending fences on a hot summer day, and the question came out of nowhere. "Dad, how did you know Mom was the one? That she was the person you were supposed to spend your life with?" Kade paused in his work, considering the question. "I think I knew it the moment I saw her," he said finally. "Sitting there on that fence post, silhouetted against the sunset. Something in my chest just recognized her, knew she was important. But I did not understand it fully until later, until I got to know her. Then I realized she was not just important, she was essential. She made me want to be better, want to build something lasting. She made me believe in the future." "That is what I want someday," James said. "That kind of love. You will find it," Kade assured him. "When you are ready, and when the right person comes along, you will know." Emily proved to have a talent for both sewing and business, and by the time she was 16, she was managing much of the day-to-day operations of the dress shop. Violet was proud of her daughter's acumen and independence, seeing in her a strength that would serve her well in life. William, the youngest, turned out to have a gift with animals. He could gentle the most skittish horse, could sense when cattle were about to bolt. Kade recognized something of himself in his youngest son, that instinctive connection with the natural world. The years rolled on, bringing both joys and sorrows. Mrs. Patterson passed away peacefully in her sleep, and the whole town mourned. Richard Rowlands had a bad fall from his horse and spent months recovering, though he eventually regained his health. There were droughts and floods, good years and bad, but through it all, Kade and Violet's love remained constant. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Kade took Violet back to the canyon with the spring-fed pool. Their children were old enough to manage on their own for a day, and Kade wanted to celebrate this milestone in the place where he had proposed. The canyon had not changed much. The cottonwood trees were taller, but the water still ran clear, and the red rock walls still provided shelter and peace. They spread a blanket just as they had 20 years before and shared a meal in comfortable silence. 20 years, Violet said, shaking her head in wonder. It feels like both forever and no time at all. I know what you mean, Kade said. Sometimes I still see you sitting on that fence post and it feels like yesterday. Other times, I cannot remember what my life was like before you. Violet leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. Do you ever regret it, the life we built? It has not always been easy. Not once, Kade said firmly. Every challenge we faced together. Every joy was doubled because I got to share it with you. You are my home, Violet, you always have been. And you are mine, she replied. You gave me a reason to stay, and I have never once regretted that decision. They sat by the pool for hours, talking about their children, their dreams for the future, the years they had shared. When the sun began to set, painting the canyon walls in gold and rose, they stood and held each other, watching the light change just as they had on so many evenings before. I love you, Kade said. More now than ever. I love you too, Violet replied. Today, tomorrow, and always. The years continued their march. James grew into a fine young man and eventually married a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch. They settled on a piece of land that Kade helped them buy, starting their own family. Emily fell in love with a merchant from Santa Fe, and after a proper courtship, they married and moved to the city, though they visited often. William stayed on the ranch, working alongside his father and eventually taking over more of the daily operations as Kade grew older. Grandchildren arrived, filling the house with noise and energy once again. Kade and Violet delighted in their growing family, in the legacy they had built together. Their love story had produced not just children but a whole community of people bound together by blood and affection. As they entered their 60s, Kade's hair turned silver and Violet's face bore the lines of a life well lived. But to each other, they were still young, still the cowboy and the lost woman who had found each other at sunset all those years ago. One spring evening, when the air was soft and the first stars were just appearing in the deepening sky, Kade and Violet sat together on their porch. William and his wife were inside putting their children to bed, and the house was settling into its evening rhythms. Tell me again about the first time we met, Violet said, though she knew the story by heart. Kade smiled, taking her hand. I was riding back from tracking stolen cattle, exhausted and ready to fall out of my saddle. The sun was setting, painting the whole world gold and red. And there you were, sitting on that fence post like you were waiting for me. I was, Violet said softly. I just did not know it yet. You looked so lost, so sad. I almost kept riding, told myself it was none of my business, but something made me stop. Something told me you were important. You asked if I was waiting for someone, Violet continued, and you said you were waiting for a reason to stay. They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching the stars emerge. Their life together had been everything they could have hoped for and more. They had built something lasting, something beautiful out of a chance meeting and a shared meal. I found my reason, Violet said eventually, the best reason there ever was. So did I, Kade replied. So did I. More years passed, and with them came the natural changes of aging. Kade's back bothered him on cold mornings, and Violet's hands grew stiff, making sewing more difficult. But they adapted, supported each other, found new ways to contribute to the family and community they loved. They became the elders of Monticello, the old couple everyone knew and respected. Young people would come to them for advice about love and life, and they would share their wisdom freely, always emphasizing the importance of kindness, commitment, and choosing each other every day. On a warm summer evening, When Kade was 72 and Violet was 70, they sat together on their porch as they had countless times before. The sunset was particularly spectacular that evening, with clouds catching the light and turning brilliant shades of orange and purple. "Do you remember," Violet said dreamily, "that first sunset when you found me?" "Like it was yesterday," Kade assured her. "I was so lost then, so alone I had given up on everything. But you stayed." "I stayed," Violet confirmed. "Best decision I ever made." Kade turned to look at her, this woman who had been his partner for over 50 years. Her hair was white now, her face deeply lined, but to him, she was as beautiful as she had been that first evening. More so because every line represented a year they had shared, every silver hair a memory they had made together. "I love you, Violet Quinlan," he said. "I love you, Kade Quinlan," she replied. They sat together as the sun set, their hands clasped, their hearts beating in rhythm after so many years. Around them, their family moved and laughed and lived, a testament to the power of two people choosing each other, choosing love, choosing to build something lasting. The years had been good to them. They had known hardship and loss, yes, but they had also known profound joy and deep contentment. They had raised children who were good people, who carried forward the values they had been taught. They had built a ranch that would last for generations. They had loved each other through everything, without reservation or regret. As darkness settled over the New Mexico landscape, stars beginning to wink into existence overhead, Kade thought back to that long-ago evening when he had been a lonely cowboy with no real home, no real purpose. He thought about the woman sitting alone at sunset, waiting for a reason to stay. He had given her that reason, but in truth, they had given it to each other. They had created a life together that was richer and more meaningful than either could have built alone. They had found in each other not just love, but home. And now, in the twilight of their years, surrounded by the family and community they had nurtured, they could look back with satisfaction and forward with peace. Their love story, which had begun with a chance meeting and a simple act of kindness, had become something legendary in Monticello, a tale passed down through generations. "Tell me about the sunset," their great-grandchildren would beg, and Kade and Violet would smile and share the story once more, never tiring of the telling. Because it was their story, the foundation on which everything else had been built. It was the moment when two lost souls found each other and decided against all odds to hope, to try, to love, and in the end, that was all anyone could ask for. To love and be loved, to build something lasting, to leave the world a little better than you found it. Kade and Violet Quinlan had done all that and more. Their love had created ripples that extended far beyond their own lives, touching everyone they met, everyone they helped, everyone who heard their story and believed that maybe, just maybe, they could find that kind of love too. As the evening deepened into night, Kade and Violet remained on their porch, reluctant to go inside and end this perfect moment. Tomorrow would bring its own demands and delights, but tonight they simply existed together, two halves of a whole as they had been since that first sunset so many years ago. "No regrets?" Kade asked softly. "Not a single one," Violet replied. "You? None. You gave me everything I never knew I wanted." "We gave it to each other," Violet corrected gently. "Yes," Kade agreed. "We did." They sat in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the night, the crickets singing and the occasional call of an owl. Inside the house, they could hear William talking to his children, hear laughter and the sounds of family. This was their legacy, Kade thought. Not just the land or the business or the material things they would leave behind, but this: love, family, community. The knowledge that they had mattered, that their lives had meant something. Violet squeezed his hand, and Kade knew she was thinking the same thing. They had always been in sync like that, able to understand each other without words. "Ready to go in?" she asked eventually. "In a minute," Kade said. "I want to look at the stars a little longer." So they sat together under the vast New Mexico sky, the same sky that had witnessed their first meeting, their courtship, their wedding, the births of their children and grandchildren. The same sky that would continue long after they were gone, eternal and unchanging. But they had changed things, Kade and Violet. They had taken a moment of despair and turned it into hope. They had taken loneliness and transformed it into love. They had taken two broken people and made them whole. The seasons continued to turn, bringing with them the endless cycle of renewal and rest. Kade and Violet aged gracefully, their love deepening with each passing year. They remained active in the community, though they gradually handed over more responsibilities to their children and grandchildren. William proved to be an excellent steward of the ranch, expanding it thoughtfully while maintaining the values his parents had instilled. James and his wife had 5 children of their own, all of whom spent summers at the ranch, learning the skills and traditions that had sustained the family for generations. Emily's business in Santa Fe thrived, and she often credited her success to the work ethic and integrity her parents had modeled. The dress shop in Monticello eventually closed as times changed and ready-made clothing became more accessible. But Violet continued to sew for friends and family, creating beautiful quilts and special occasion dresses until her hands simply could not manage the fine work anymore. Kade remained sharp and engaged until his final days, still offering advice on ranch management, still telling stories to anyone who would listen. His favorite story, of course, was about meeting Violet at sunset, about a woman waiting for a reason to stay. On a cool autumn morning, just after his 78th birthday, Kade did not wake up. He died peacefully in his sleep, Violet beside him as she had been for over 50 years. The grief that swept through the family and community was profound, but it was tempered by gratitude for a life well lived and love well shared. At his funeral, which seemed to draw half the territory, person after person stood to speak about how Kade had touched their lives. He had been a good neighbor, a fair employer, a devoted husband and father, a pillar of the community. But more than any of that, he had been kind, the kind of man who stopped for a stranger in distress, who offered help without expecting anything in return. Violet sat through it all with quiet dignity, though her heart was breaking. They had known their time was limited, had discussed what would come after, but nothing could truly prepare her for the reality of life without him. He had been her anchor, her partner, her greatest love. The world felt suddenly vast and empty without him in it. But she was not the same lost woman who had sat on that fence post so many years ago. Kade had given her strength, and their life together had given her purpose. She had a family who loved her, a community that supported her. She would grieve, yes, but she would not break. The weeks and months after Kade's death were difficult. Violet moved through them in a daze, supported by her children and grandchildren. They made sure she was never alone unless she wanted to be, took turns staying with her, helped her adjust to this new reality. Slowly, gradually, the sharp edge of grief dulled to a constant ache. Violet began to find joy again in small things. A grandchild's laugh, the first flowers of spring, the sunset painting the sky in familiar colors. She spent her days surrounded by family, telling stories about Kade to the younger generations who had not known him as well. She wanted them to understand who he had been, what he had meant, how his simple act of kindness on a long-ago evening had changed not just her life, but the lives of everyone who came after. On the first anniversary of Kade's death, William drove Violet out to the canyon with the spring-fed pool. It was a crisp autumn day, the cottonwood trees golden, the sky impossibly blue. Violet walked slowly to the edge of the water, William supporting her arm, and stood there remembering. This was where Kade had proposed. This was where they had celebrated their 20th anniversary. This was where they had returned countless times over the years, always finding peace and renewal in this secret pocket of beauty. "He loved you so much, Mama," William said softly. "I know," Violet replied. "And I loved him, still do. He would want you to be happy." "I know that too." Violet smiled, though tears streaked her cheeks. "And I am, in my way. I have all of you, all the love we created together. That is more than most people ever get." They stood together in silence, mother and son, honoring the memory of the man who had been husband and father, who had been the cornerstone of their family. When they finally left the canyon, Violet felt something shift inside her. The grief would always be there, a part of her now, but it no longer consumed her. She could remember Kade with joy as well as sadness, could celebrate what they had shared rather than only mourning what was lost. Violet lived for another 8 years after Kade's death. They were good years, filled with family and friends, with the satisfaction of seeing her grandchildren grow and thrive, of meeting great-grandchildren and watching the family continue to expand. She remained in the house she and Kade had built, surrounded by memories but not trapped by them. She hosted Sunday dinners just as she always had, kept the family connected, made sure the younger generations understood where they came from. On a spring evening, just as the sun was setting, Violet sat on her porch wrapped in a quilt one of her granddaughters had made. William's daughter Emma sat with her, holding her hand as they watched the sky turn gold and crimson. "Tell me about Grandpa," Emma asked. "Tell me about how you met." Violet smiled, though she was very tired. She had been feeling her age lately, feeling the pull of whatever came next. But she could always summon the energy to tell this story, the most important story of her life. "I was sitting on a fence post just outside town," she began, her voice soft but clear. "I was lost and alone, waiting for I did not know what. The sun was setting, painting the whole world in colors of fire. And then I saw him, this cowboy on a dusty horse, riding toward me like something out of a dream." Emma listened, rapt, as Violet continued the familiar tale. By the time she reached the end, the sun had fully set, and stars were beginning to appear. "That is the most romantic story I have ever heard," Emma said. "Do you think everyone has someone like that, someone who changes everything?" "I think everyone has the capacity for that kind of love," Violet said, "but you have to be open to it. You have to be willing to take a chance, to be vulnerable, to hope even when hope seems foolish." "I want that someday," Emma said. "You will find it," Violet assured her. "When the time is right and you are ready." That night, Violet went to sleep feeling content and at peace. She had lived a long life, a good life. She had known great love and profound loss, had raised children and built a legacy. She had been broken and had been made whole. She had found her reason to stay, and that reason had given her everything. When William found her the next morning, she was gone, a peaceful expression on her face as if she had simply drifted off into a pleasant dream. He wept, as did all her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, but they also celebrated. Violet had lived 86 years, 55 of them with Kade and another 8 carrying his memory. She had been loved and had loved in return. She had mattered. They buried her beside Kade in the Monticello Cemetery, under a cottonwood tree with a view of the western horizon. At sunset on the day of her funeral, the whole family gathered at the gravesite. 3 generations of Quinlans come to say goodbye to the woman who had been the heart of their family. As the sun slipped below the horizon, painting the sky in those familiar shades of amber and crimson. William told the story one more time. He told about a lonely cowboy and a lost woman, about a chance meeting at sunset, about finding reasons to stay. "They gave us this," he said, gesturing to the assembled family. "All of us exist because on one evening a man chose to stop and a woman chose to hope. That is their legacy. That is what we carry forward. Not just their blood, but their values, their love, their belief that kindness and commitment and choosing each other matters." The family stood together in the fading light, connected by blood and story, by the love of two people who had found each other when they both needed it most. The world would keep turning, seasons would continue to change, but the love Kade and Violet had shared would echo through generations. A reminder that sometimes, all it takes to change everything is stopping for someone who is waiting, offering a hand to someone who is lost, choosing to hope when hope seems impossible. And somewhere in whatever came after, Kade and Violet were together again, whole and young and forever bound by the love that had sustained them through all the years of their lives. Their story was complete, their circle closed, their promise fulfilled. They had found each other at sunset, two lost souls searching for meaning and purpose. They had built a life together, raised a family, created a legacy. They had loved deeply and truly without reservation or regret, and in the end that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.